Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a demonetized channel to discuss world affairs from a different perspective. DFTW is not whining or giving up even though we have been demonetized for 10 months till today. Because of financial difficulties, we cannot upload videos daily, but we are still trying our best to upload at least 2 videos weekly. We discuss the Ukraine conflict today, a topic we last touched on quite a long time ago. The Russian special military operation has almost become an all-out war between NATO and Russia, with Ukraine as the battlefield and Ukrainians as NATO's cannon fodder. Russians experienced setbacks and Russia began to mobilize more troops. It was no longer a special military operation as Russia's goal changed. From the very start of the military operation, Putin wanted to demilitarize Ukraine, so it would not seek NATO membership and pose a threat to Russia. It claimed at the beginning of the war that Russia did not aim to occupy Ukraine. However, recently, 2 republics and 2 states in the east part of Ukraine became part of Russia. Just like Moscow annexing Crimea in 2014. On September 30, 2022, local time, the signing ceremony of the treaty on the accession of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson to the Russian Federation was held in the Kremlin in the presence of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also on September 30, 2022, Ukrainian leaders signed Ukraine's application to join NATO, and it seems the war between the 2 former Soviet Union members will not end shortly. Ukraine says it is taking a decisive step, and is already a de facto NATO member. The war has proven the interoperability of Ukrainian and NATO standards, which is already a reality for Ukraine, both on the battlefield and in all aspects of our interaction. On the same day, the Ukrainian president chaired the National Security Council emergency meeting, aiming to strengthen and expand the international coalition supporting Ukraine, increasing their military and technical assistance to Ukraine, and implementing access to security guarantees in the international arena. NATO does not respond to Ukraine's application immediately. Instead, it says its focus now is on providing immediate support to Ukraine. Asked on September 30, 2022, at local time, whether NATO was prepared to consider the Ukrainian application, and whether it would consider fast-track accession procedures like admitting Sweden and Finland, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg responded that NATO had repeatedly stated that the door to NATO remains open. However, he also said that NATO membership needs to be decided by the 30 allies, and all member states will decide by consensus. He noted that the focus now is on providing immediate support to Ukraine to help it counter Russia's special military operation. As the leader of NATO and actual controller of the military alliance, the White House pours cold water on Ukraine's NATO membership. The White House signals that it will not support Ukraine's request to accelerate its application for NATO membership. On September 30, 2022, CNBC reported that U.S. National Security Advisor Sullivan stated that the U.S. supports an open-door policy on joining the military alliance, but added that Ukraine's NATO membership should be taken up at a different time. Separately, the Biden administration was surprised by Ukraine's announcement that it was seeking accelerated membership in NATO, according to 2 U.S. officials familiar with internal discussions, according to the U.S. political news site Politico. In addition, when asked by Politico whether she supported Ukraine's membership in NATO, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi declined to support the proposal explicitly, but said she supported providing security guarantees. The House Speaker said something but meant nothing, as usual. However, her remarks on Ukraine's NATO membership application tell us she is still alive, and that's it. The Politico report also noted that Ukraine's request for NATO membership has long been a thorny issue for Washington. Ukraine has sought security guarantees over the past years, but many in the United States are worried about a possible war with Russia. The U.S. is good at fighting small and weak countries, not big and robust ones, and there are better choices than Russia if the U.S. wants to start a war. The Ukraine conflict is destined to be a proxy war, and it is improbable for NATO to accept Ukraine as a member before the war ends. We have yet to see the possibility of ending the war, which is far from us, especially when Russia takes 4 regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and Ukraine attacked the Crimea Bridge, where 3 people were reportedly killed during the colossal blast. The annexation of 4 Ukraine regions by Russia according to the results released by the local election commission on the evening of the 27th, most voters of the 4 regions, particularly in Donetsk and Luhansk, where over 98% of voters said yes, were in favor of joining the Russian Federation, in considerable contrast with previous poll results conducted in those areas, meaning all democratic results could be influenced and directed by other factors. In addition, according to data released by the local election commission, the turnout in all 4 regions of the referendum has exceeded the 50% threshold set by law, and the referendum results can be considered valid. On September 30th, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed treaties on the accession of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions to Russia with the leaders of these regions at the Kremlin. From that moment onward, any attacks from Ukraine would be regarded as assaulting Russian soil, and Russia would have the right to protect its land and counter any invasion from the Ukraine side. Russian President Vladimir Putin said in a speech at the Kremlin that Russia called on the Ukrainian side to stop military actions as soon as possible and return to the negotiating table, according to the latest reports by some Russian media on September 30, 2022. Putin also said the Russian side is ready to negotiate with the Ukrainian side. In his speech, Putin said that the Soviet Union no longer exists, and that Russia does not seek to restore it. The rest of the world, especially the former Soviet Union's member states, may think the opposite way. Most countries in the world do not recognize the status of Crimea, which Russia took over from Ukraine 8 years ago in 2014. The new accession of 4 Ukrainian areas will surely invite more criticism from the rest of the world. We cannot say most countries oppose Russia's annexing those 4 regions. Still, Russia will get less moral and material support from outside, and even China and India will not back Moscow explicitly. In China, it will be a susceptible topic, as the Russian Empire had grabbed 3 million Chinese lands from the Qing dynasty, and in Chinese maps, many cities still bear the names from the past, not the names given by Russia. Because of the geopolitical pressures from NATO members, particularly the United States, China and Russia must join hands. However, public opinion in China is divided, and many Chinese are still worried about Russia's greed for land. On the Russian side, it is also a tricky question whether it should trust a potent China, which may overtake the United States shortly, becoming another superpower economically, technologically, and militarily. Some U.S. opinion leaders warn Russia that China may claim Siberia and other areas in the Far East when it becomes more assertive in the coming decades. Although they tend to alienate Russia from China so the U.S. can defeat them one by one, Russian politicians will be worried. When China recovered Hong Kong, which the Qing dynasty ceded to Britain in the 1840s, Beijing showed the world that it did not recognize unequal treaties between old China and imperialist countries. The Russian Empire was one of those imperialist countries, or the worst one, that forced the Qing dynasty to sign unequal treaties. In previous videos, we said the 3 nations, China, Russia, and America, are like 3 ancient Chinese kingdoms 1800 years ago, and their coalition and struggle are ever-changing. China might be cautious when dealing with the Ukraine conflict after Russia took over 4 Ukraine republics and states. Moscow's military action in Ukraine is now out of control, and it has become a war between 2 countries, and the battlefield may extend to Russia's mainland. The blast of Crimea Bridge is a signal, meaning Ukraine may not refrain from Russia's territories. Ukraine does not give up Crimea, and does not recognize it as Russian soil, but it does not have a navy to recover the peninsula. Moreover, NATO does not equip Ukraine with airplanes for fear that Putin may use nuclear weapons to retaliate. Western media are excited about Ukraine's advancement on the battlefield. Still, when the Russians cannot hit their goal, and are even defeated, the looming nuclear war may ruin the whole human race, putting everyone on the globe in danger. Since the war in Ukraine broke out, the Russian army's performance has been astonishingly poor, and annexing the 4 regions is a move Russian President Putin had to make to escalate the special military operation to a state-level war so that he can mobilize more troops. On October 10, 2022, Russian President Putin confirmed that his army had attacked Ukraine with missiles. It seems the war has escalated. Ukraine is more eager to join NATO than before, and it feels NATO's indirect involvement does not help much. However, becoming a NATO member via a fast track like Sweden and Finland is delusional for Kyiv, as the US and other NATO members do not want to face Russian nuclear weapons directly. Russia is a nuclear power with the most warheads worldwide, and it also boasts intercontinental ballistic missiles that can send them to every corner of the world. At present, war means life and death to Russia, but for the United States, war is just business, and American warmongers do not want to corner Putin to a position that he resorts to nuclear bombs. Some Western analysts say Putin is blackmailing the West with his atomic bombs, and he may not use them. The White House does not want to gamble, however. It knows that if Putin is driven mad, he will drive the whole world mad, including the United States. Biden says the current crisis is more severe than the Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened 6 decades ago, and he is correct this time, very rarely. Hence, the US will be the last to agree on the fast track of Ukraine's NATO membership. As usual, the comical Ukrainian president will face Russia's retaliation alone. We feel sorry for Ukrainians and Russians, who should not be at war with each other if a handful of war criminals had not instigated the conflict out of geopolitical considerations. Before ending today's video, we want to thank our supporters and patrons again for their continuous support over the past 2 years. Even though YouTube has demonetized our channels and keeps all advertisement income without paying us anything for our work, we still try our best to make high-quality videos about world affairs from an independent and impartial perspective. Please support us in keeping DFTW alive through PayPal, Patreon, GoFundMe, or Buy Me a Coffee. Much appreciated.